when we're able to control these gauges digitally through a computer, what we can do is we can set that zero from that computer, right? And so that becomes much more important when we're seeing multiple gauges on a fixture, on a jig, or something like that, measuring big parts, something like that. And so to be able to have that type of efficiency, where we can just press a single button on our computer to send that zero out to multiple gauges, becomes really important.
This video is brought to you by Mitutoyo. Precision is our profession. If you're looking for real-world insights, tips from leading industry experts, the latest trends in products and technology, you've come to the right place. From MSC Industrial Supply, this is Tooling Up.
Hello and welcome to Tooling Up. I'm your host, Toni Neary, and I'm so glad that you've joined us here today. Before we get to today's guest, let's go ahead and take care of a little bit of business. If you're new around here, go ahead and click those like and subscribe buttons so you don't miss a single episode. All right, everybody clicked? Great. Today, I'm excited to be talking about the next generation of smart measurement technology, and we have Hany Abdel-Motaleb, Sales Engineer for Data Management Solutions at Mitutoyo. Hannie, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Tooling Up.
Hi, Tony. Thank you very much.
So one of the things that I always love is hearing how people found their way into our amazing industry. Can you share a little bit about your journey and your journey to Mitutoyo?
Yeah, I've been with Mitutoyo for about 10 years now, and I first learned about it when I was going to school at Northern Illinois University, and which is just about 30 minutes from Mitutoyo's US headquarters. And I majored in industrial management and technology, so I was taking machining courses, SPC classes, CAD classes, and one of those classes was a metrology class, and my professor was um, one of the executive vice presidents, or one of the presidents at Mitutoyo, and he taught this class once a week, and he introduced me to metrology and made it, just a really fun, interesting class, and I'd gotten hooked ever since.
I love it when industry professionals can kind of teach and inspire the next generation. I think that's amazing and very cool with developing technology. So when I think of metrology, I think of Mitutoyo. And for decades, you've been synonymous with quality control, precision measurement, and you're often in the quality end of the production process. So you're generally in that quality lab. But let's talk a little bit about what you're seeing with the movement of precision measurement happening like earlier in the process and kind of throughout the process. How does that work?
Yeah, so typically, a lot of the, especially high-end Mitutoyo equipment is done in the quality labs, right? So for final inspection, those types of things are happening. Our equipment is always happening in the quality labs, and so that's where a lot of the Mitutoyo staff spend their time, figuring out solutions there. And so what we're seeing now is really growing more towards in-process inspection, and certainly we've had tons of our tools, mics, calipers, indicators, height gauges, those things out on the shop floor, but we're interfacing with them a lot more. And with my job as a data management specialist, is that we're seeing people collecting more and more data out on the shop floor. And then we're seeing actually our higher end equipment finding its way out onto the shop floor as well, like shop floor CMMs, for example. And so the industry is just collecting a lot more data, doing a lot more measurements with in-process inspection. And there's a whole bunch of different benefits for doing that.
All right, Hanny, bidirectional communication technology is not something that is probably a household term right now. Can you break this down a little bit more for our viewers? What is bidirectional communication technology?
So, bidirectional communication or two-way communication is the communication from the gauge to the computer and from the computer back to the gauge. And so, what we've typically had to offer with our simple measuring tools like mics, calipers, and indicators is the ability to just send data one way from the tool to the computer, and just sending a single measurement value, right? And so with bidirectional communication, what we're able to do is we're able to request that data, but then we're able to request so many more things as well. And so this bidirectional communication just makes the lives of the operators just so much easier, so much simpler, and controlling all sorts of different gauges is just really beneficial.
what are some of the enhancements? What are some of the benefits of starting to integrate some of these bidirectional communication technology tools earlier in the process?
Traceability from the measurement to the gauge is becoming much, much more important. And so we're not having to rely on the operators or the inspectors to record which tools that they're using, where they could maybe make mistakes, or maybe, again, stickers fall off that have those serial numbers on them. And so we don't really know which gauges we're using to do these measurements. With this bidirectional communication, now we can use our software and our hardware to talk to each other to grab this information. And so now we can start to pull the serial number from within the gauge for every single measurement that we take. And this becomes hugely, hugely important when we're talking about highly regulatory industries like in aerospace, like a medical. And then, you're going to see this, everywhere else, right? Automotive is going to be big, oil and gas. So pretty much, all the major industries are going to require this type of traceability.
And for me, that's Industry 5.0, right? 4.0 is the automation, 5.0 is data and data back and forth and really having that bidirectional. So you've mentioned controlling multiple gauges. How does this really improve efficiency, especially those with complex setups?
So the first thing an operator or an inspector does is checks the calibration sticker. The second thing that they do is they check the zero of the gauge, right? If their zero is off on that gauge, then all the measurements are worthless at that point, right? And so when we're able to control these gauges digitally through a computer, what we can do is we can set that zero from that computer, right? And so that becomes much more important when we're seeing multiple gauges on a fixture, on a jig or something like that, measuring big parts, something like that. And so to be able to have that type of efficiency where we can just press a single button on our computer to send that zero out to multiple gauges becomes really important. And it's not just the zero. We can just hit a button to turn on all the gauges, to even set a preset. And maybe we're not going to zero, but we're going to do a preset on these gauges. And so being able to control multiple gauges is really just going to make life a lot easier for those people who are doing those inspections. It error proofs things, makes sure that they're not missing zeros on certain gauges. And then, like I said earlier, we're grabbing that traceability, that serial number from each gauge, making sure that they're calibrated and we know which tools are doing which measurements. It becomes really valuable.
I think that's amazing, and it sounds incredibly advanced. I'd imagine this has got to be fairly complicated to get set up and running, right?
So typically what we see with this type of thing now, while maybe turning on gauges or sending commands to certain gauges may not be that new of a thing, but typically what that's done is with like PLCs and controllers and using different types of sensors and these types of things. And so what Mitutoyo has done is really revolutionize the indicator, which is a bread and butter gauge at every single machine shop or pretty much every single manufacturer in the United States. And so when I mentioned different fixtures here, is that style of indicator, that sort of round body and the spindle on there. There's fixtures that are designed specifically for that. And so now what we're able to do is just do sort of a mix and match or a plug and play, where we can swap out these old style indicators, put in these new ones, and it becomes really easy to do. And then from the communication side, nothing really fancy is needed. So we have software called MeasureLink that can communicate to these gauges, that has all these commands. And it's just a simple, Windows software where we can do these different, commands and button clicks and control our gauges how we want them to be.
Well, it sounds like Mitutoyo has done it again. This has been incredibly insightful. Moving measurement from the back end to an integrated, controllable part of the process is truly game-changing for efficiency and quality. Hanny, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of this with us.
Great. Thank you so much.
It was great nerding out with Hanny today, and if you enjoyed our conversation as much as I did and you want to see more discussions just like this, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel. To find out more about Mitutoyo's bidirectional communication technology and MeasureLink software, visit www.mscdirect.com/Mitutoyo. Thanks, and we'll see you next time on Tooling Up.
Want more insights and ideas to improve the efficiency and productivity of your operations? Check out the Tooling Up video playlist to hear tips that can take your company to the next level. And subscribe to our channel so you won't miss out.